If you haven't watched part 1 yet, check the video description below. This is the continuation of the shocking wedding story that left everyone in Rose Hill speechless. The sun rose over Rose Hill like any other morning, but in the Thompson household, peace had packed its bags. The wedding that never was had left behind a bitter taste, and Clara's parents, especially Mr. Thompson, were boiling with anger. Not only had the pastor humiliated their daughter at the altar, but he had done it in front of the most powerful people in town. Celebrities, politicians, even the mayor had watched Clara fall apart right there on the altar. It wasn't just about broken vows anymore. It was about reputation, about power. "This cannot go unpunished," Mr. Thompson had said that night, pacing around the living room in his gold house slippers. "Who does he think he is? That pastor? That nobody? To embarrass my daughter like that?" Clara sat quietly in a corner, her eyes sunken, her fingers still sore from where the black bracelet had cracked and disappeared. She hadn't spoken much since that day, but when she finally did, her voice was low and cold. "He ruined everything." Mr. Thompson wasted no time. He called Chief Johnson, an old friend in high places, and his family's personal lawyer, Richard. In less than 48 hours, formal charges were filed against Pastor James for defamation, emotional damage, and disrupting a lawful ceremony. And by the following evening, the unthinkable happened. Pastor James Williams was arrested. They came for him quietly. No sirens, no handcuffs at first, just 2 plain-clothed officers and a warrant. The church staff stood in disbelief as their pastor was taken away without even being allowed to finish evening prayers. Inside the holding cell, Pastor James sat calmly with his Bible, whispering scriptures under his breath. But in his heart, he knew something much deeper than legal trouble was at play. He had seen the glow of that bracelet. He had felt the cold shift in the atmosphere when Clara walked in. This wasn't just heartbreak. It was spiritual warfare. Across town, Daniel was nowhere to be found. After the wedding was called off, he left Rose Hill quietly with no calls, no texts, no explanations. Some said he'd gone to Abuja. Others whispered he was in a prayer camp. But the truth was, Daniel was trying to clear his mind and fight the strange dreams that had started the night after the wedding. Dreams where he was trapped, walking in circles. Dreams where he saw Clara calling him, reaching out with that same cracked bracelet glowing in the dark. And Clara? She had made up her mind. She couldn't let Daniel go. That was when someone whispered a name to her. A name people only said in fear. A woman said to speak with spirits, to change destinies. Deep in the forest outside Rose Hill, where even birds stopped singing, lived a spiritualist called Mama Nkata, and Clara went to find her. The forest path leading to Mama Nkata's shrine was narrow, overgrown, and filled with thorns. But Clara didn't blink. She walked like a woman on a mission. Her maid of honor, Elaine, had begged her to let go of it all, to heal, to move on. But Clara didn't want healing. She wanted Daniel. She wanted her wedding, her fairy tale, her happy ending at all costs. When she finally stood before the thatched hut, the air grew colder. The trees behind her stood still, as though even the wind had stopped to watch. From inside came the voice, low, raspy, and full of something that didn't sound human. "You came late, child of pride. I've been expecting you." Clara stepped inside. The shrine was dark. Smoke hung in the air like a curtain. Animal skulls lined the shelves. Dried herbs swung from the roof. And in the middle sat Mama Nkata, her skin wrinkled like dry bark, eyes white with no pupils, and a heavy red cloth tied around her waist. "I want him back," Clara said, her voice shaking slightly. "I want him to love me again. I want him to never leave me." Mama Nkata chuckled. Love? What you want is not love. What you want is ownership. I don't care, Clara snapped. Just make it happen. The old woman pulled out a black leather pouch and poured ash into a small calabash. She added a feather, a mirror shard, and finally, a single drop of Clara's blood. The mixture hissed like oil on fire. Mama Nkata looked up. You still have the bracelet? Clara nodded slowly. She had retrieved the broken pieces after the church disaster and hidden them in her drawer. Good, the spiritualist said. Bring it to me tomorrow. I will remake it. Stronger. This time, it will not only bind his heart, it will bind his destiny. Back in Rose Hill, the news of Pastor James's arrest was spreading fast. Some people were outraged, others were silent, too afraid to speak against the powerful Thompsons. But not everyone was scared. Angela, a young journalist known for stirring the pot, heard about the case and immediately smelled corruption. He's been locked up without bail? She said, flipping through court documents. That's illegal. And based on what? A ruined wedding? She reached out to the church elders and soon discovered there was no official proof, just pressure from powerful people and a lot of missing paperwork. Angela wasn't the type to look away. She made it her mission to get Pastor James out, even if it meant digging into the Thompsons' deepest secrets. Meanwhile, Daniel was beginning to feel like a shadow of himself. He was staying in an Airbnb on the outskirts of Port Harcourt, trying to regain focus, but his thoughts were foggy. His dreams were worse. He kept waking up sweating, heart pounding, hearing Clara's voice calling him like a whisper in the dark. Then one morning, a package arrived at his doorstep. No note, no name, just a new black bracelet made of polished stones and wrapped in a red string. The moment Daniel touched it, he collapsed. Daniel woke up on the floor. His body was drenched in sweat, his shirt clinging to his chest like it had been soaked in a storm. The black bracelet lay beside him, glinting faintly under the morning sun. He didn't remember falling. He didn't remember sleeping. All he remembered was touching the bracelet, and then darkness. He sat up slowly, head pounding like church bells in his skull. Something felt off. The room felt colder. He looked around and saw nothing unusual. But inside, something had shifted. Meanwhile, in Rose Hill, the church was a shadow of itself. With Pastor James still locked up, services were being held by junior ministers. Some of the congregation had stopped coming. Others whispered that maybe the pastor had gone too far by calling off a rich family's wedding. The rumors were flying, and faith was fading. But not for everyone. Angela, now knee-deep in legal papers and audio recordings, discovered a voice note between Mr. Thompson and a retired judge. In it, Mr. Thompson clearly said, "I don't care how you do it. Just keep him behind bars until this embarrassment dies down." It was gold. With the help of a young tech lawyer named Barrister Peter, Angela prepared a petition and filed a case of unlawful detention and abuse of influence. The fire was catching on. Social media was boiling. Free Pastor James started trending. But deep in the heart of the town, Clara had completed her ritual. Mama Nkata had rebuilt the bracelet, infused it with stronger spirits, and warned Clara once again, what is bound by force will always bleed somewhere. Clara didn't listen. That evening, under the cover of dusk, she boarded a flight to Port Harcourt. She knew exactly where Daniel was staying, and this time she wasn't going with flowers, she was going with control. Back at Daniel's rented apartment, the effects of the bracelet were growing. He was losing focus. He'd started sleep-talking. He felt drawn to things he didn't understand. He even picked up his phone once and began typing a message to Clara, but stopped halfway, confused. When Clara arrived, She didn't knock. She had the spare key. She entered quietly and found Daniel sitting on the floor, his eyes vacant. He looked up, dazed. "Clara?" She smiled gently, walking toward him like everything was normal. "You miss me, don't you?" I don't know," he said, rubbing his temples. "I feel strange." She knelt beside him and placed the bracelet on his wrist. "Don't fight it. We belong together." Back in Rose Hill, a judge had finally reviewed Ada's petition and issued a warrant for Pastor James's immediate release. That same night, as he walked out of the prison gates, a strong wind blew over the town, as if something ancient had been disturbed. The fire had been lit, and now it was coming for everything hidden in darkness. Clara stayed with Daniel for 2 days. She cooked, she cleaned, she smiled. But Daniel, though physically present, was slipping deeper into himself. His memory faded. His phone lay dead for hours. He spoke less, stared more. Each night, Clara made sure the bracelet stayed tight on his wrist. Each night, the red string glowed faintly when he closed his eyes. By the 3rd day, Daniel had stopped asking questions. "See?" Clara said softly one morning as she fed him warm pap and beans. "We're perfect now, just the 2 of us." But something shifted that afternoon. Daniel's friend from university, David, had been trying to reach him for days. Finally, when Daniel missed their scheduled Zoom call for the 3rd time, David grew worried. He knew Daniel's habits. He knew Daniel didn't vanish without reason. He called a mutual friend in Port Harcourt, tracked down the apartment, and made a surprise visit. What he saw shook him. Daniel was seated like a statue, eyes half open, a strange black bracelet wrapped tightly around his wrist. Clara answered the door looking perfect, almost unnaturally so. When David asked questions, she smiled and said, "Daniel's just tired. He's recovering." But David wasn't convinced. He excused himself politely, went straight outside, and called Ada. "Something's wrong," he said. "Clara's here. Daniel's not himself, and there's this weird bracelet on him." Ada's heart skipped. She was already working on clearing Pastor James's name, but this sounded like the final piece of a deeper puzzle. Meanwhile, back in Rose Hill, Mr. Thompson and his lawyer Richard were facing legal heat. New evidence had surfaced. Emails, call recordings, bank transfers. All pointed to a calculated plan to keep Pastor James in jail. The court had moved fast, and both men were summoned. And on that same day, Grace Covenant Church overflowed. Pastor James had returned. He stood before the pulpit in his white robe, voice calm but thunderous. "We wrestle not against flesh and blood," he said, "but against powers and principalities." The congregation erupted in applause. Some wept, some stood, but everyone knew the storm was not over. Pastor James prayed deeply that night. He prayed for Daniel. He prayed for Clara. And as he closed his Bible, he saw something in the spirit. A house in Port Harcourt, a broken young man, a woman in white, and a bracelet glowing like fire. The next morning, he was on a bus. When he arrived, Daniel was sitting by the window, rocking slightly, whispering Clara's name like a song. Clara sat across from him, brushing his hair slowly. Then Pastor James knocked. Clara opened the door, stunned. "You?" He looked past her and saw Daniel. The bracelet glowed. "I've come for him," Pastor James said, voice steady. "And I've come for the truth." Clara laughed, but it wasn't her laugh. It was something darker. "You came too late, Pastor. He's mine now, forever." But the moment she said it, the bracelet sparked. And in that room, with walls painted white and air thick with silence, the battle began. Pastor James didn't flinch. He stepped into the apartment, the door creaking shut behind him. The moment his foot touched the floor, the bracelet on Daniel's wrist sparked again, hot, bright, and angry. Daniel's head snapped up. His eyes were red, not from tears, but from something deeper, something unnatural. "Pastor," he whispered, his voice distant. "She said we belong together." Clara stood protectively in front of him. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned. "Leave, Pastor James. This is not your battle." The pastor stepped forward, Bible in one hand, anointing oil in the other. "Exactly. This battle belongs to the Lord." The air turned cold. Clara's bracelet glowed again, the black stones pulsing like a heartbeat. She screamed, not in pain, but in rage. "He's mine!" She tried to block Pastor James, but suddenly she froze. Her legs trembled, her mouth moved, but no sound came out. She fell to her knees as the bracelet on Daniel's wrist cracked with a sharp, splitting sound. Pastor James placed one hand on Daniel's head. "In the name above all names, I command every strange spirit to leave him now." Daniel gasped. The lights flickered. The bracelet shattered completely, pieces scattering across the floor like broken glass. A gust of hot wind rushed through the room, then vanished. Daniel collapsed forward, unconscious but free. Clara screamed again, clutching her own wrist. Her bracelet was glowing brighter now, burning into her skin. "Mom and Kata lied to me," she cried. "She said he would be mine." Pastor James looked at her with sadness, not anger. "You don't force love, Clara. You don't build a future on darkness." Suddenly, Clara let out a terrible shriek. Her eyes rolled back, and she began laughing and crying at the same time. She crawled to the corner, ripping her veil off her head, muttering nonsense. Then, silence. Clara sat wide-eyed, rocking. Her mind was shattered. That same evening, news hit Rose Hill. Mr. Thompson and his lawyer were convicted. The court found them guilty of corruption, false charges, and abuse of power. The Thompson family's empire crumbled almost overnight. Their businesses lost clients. Their hotel chain faced investigations. Pastor James returned home a few days later to a thunderous celebration. Grace Covenant Church was fuller than ever. His sermons carried a new weight, refined in the fire of injustice and spiritual battle. Daniel moved back to Rose Hill quietly. He never spoke publicly about what happened, but every Sunday he sat in the second row, eyes closed in worship, free. As for Clara, she was taken to a mental health facility outside the town. Her mother visits her once a week. She no longer remembers the wedding or the bracelet. She often sits by the window, staring out, asking the nurses if they've seen the light. Mama and Kata vanished. Her shrine burned down 2 nights after Clara's breakdown. No one knows who did it, but some say she was seen walking deep into the forest, barefoot, never to return. And so, Rose Hill breathed again. One Sunday morning, as birds chirped over the hills and the sun lit up the white walls of Grace Covenant, Pastor James stood at the pulpit and said, "When people use evil to protect what they love, they end up losing it. But when truth walks through fire, it comes out gold." And the church said, "Amen." If you were moved by this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Drop a comment and tell us what lesson this story taught you. And if you haven't watched part 1, check the description below. More powerful stories are coming. Stay tuned.